It's the Dearly Departed podcast, featuring your hosts, historian Scott Michaels and filmmaker Mike Dorsey.
All right, welcome. It is episode 31 of the Dearly Departed podcast, and I'm Mike Dorsey.
And I'm Scott Michaels.
And today we're going to talk about Christmas classic songs and the people who sang them. And then at the end, we're going to go over some of the ones we hate.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
You have an axe to grind.
Oh my God. I have a list like the size of my arm that...
Amazing. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to go into it. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to ask you, did you watch the Ricardos?
I did, yeah. Did you?
Yeah, I watched it the day. I mean, I guess it came out yesterday. We're recording this on the 22nd, so
yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I only had a few reservations about it, and I can't wait to watch it again. How did you feel about it?
I liked it. It took me a good half hour to be convinced of the acting, because you have such good, we know who these people were very well. So it was difficult for me to get into the portrayals, but I did ultimately. And it took me a good hour to get in. It didn't really grip me until like the last hour. The last hour really got me. I was hooked. And, but the rest of it, I kind of just, sat through and this is all right. This is interesting. I love seeing the sets. That was really cool. And they did throw a lot of information into that 1 week,
I loved how they showed so much of the creative process, the writers' rooms and how involved, Ball and Desi were in that process and her process. I liked how they would kind of go into Lucille Ball's mind as she's being pitched scenes and she's imagining how she would play them.
Yeah.
It's real. I thought it was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, it was nice. I'm glad that they portrayed it in such a way that, she always said, I'm not funny. I'm funny on paper. I'm funny in person. I'm funny. I can do pratfalls. And someone else could be really funny naturally. I'm not. I'm funny on paper. And I like that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And she, I thought she was pretty good. Nicole Kidman, I still can't get over her face because, I can't, but she's such a beautiful woman. I don't understand why people need to do that to themselves. But anyway, that's me.
I thought she nailed the voice really well.
She did. I guess I was reading today that she smoked a lot during the production to get that voice. Yeah, which makes sense.
I know there were a lot of people that were mad that Deborah Messing wasn't cast as Lucille Ball, because Deborah Messing did, I think it was an episode of Will and Grace. She did a really great, send up of I Love Lucy. It was black and white, and she played, Lucy in it, and she was great at it. But I think what maybe people weren't taking into account was this was not Lucy. This was Lucille Ball. And they're not looking for someone who can do a cool impression of Lucy from the show, the character. They want, it's a serious dramatic role. And I'm not saying that Deborah Messing couldn't do that, but it wasn't about doing a Lucy impression. So no, that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, I remember the hubbub when it first came out, who they were casting, and I guess Aaron Sorkin had it in his mind that's who he wanted from the start, I guess. And but yeah, it wasn't an impersonation. You're right, and Deborah Messing probably would have been fine, but Nicole Kidman was fine, and I thought she's a good actress. I like her as an actress. Yeah. And I've never seen Deborah Messing do anything serious. So, and it wasn't a funny movie. It wasn't a comedy. It was a drama. So it was good. I thought it was interesting. It covered some of the same ground that we covered in our episode about it. Yeah. When, obviously their marriage issues, which we talked about, and it dealt a lot with the rivalry between Ball and Vivian Vance.
Yeah.
And how they kind of ended up having a falling out over the way Vivian, was over how the actress, had to wear these frumpy outfits and, married to a guy old enough to be her dad or her grandfather even,
Yeah.
And she makes the line about how, and the running gag is that she's not attractive enough to be his wife. It's like,
Yeah.
And I loved J.K. Simmons as Frawley, and I loved I think it's pronounced Nina Arianda as Vivian Vance. She's so I was a big fan of hers from Goliath, that show she did with Billy Bob Thornton that just ended. So I was super excited that she was cast. She's so good. She's a Tony winner. She's legit.
Okay. Well, that was good. And I was surprised at the portrayal of William Frawley. I didn't expect him to be, as likable as they made him in this. So I like to think he was really that way, because
Yeah. You hate him in the first scene. Because he's being a jerk in the table read scene. And then he softens up a bit as it goes on. I thought it was, it was pretty sympathetic based on what
it was cool when they walked over to Bordner's, wasn't it? When they were shooting with the Desilu Studios, which was actually on, is it Las Palmas or Sycamore, and right off Hollywood Boulevard. So they left the studio and walked across the street, and they were drinking in Bordner's, where we shot our Dearly Departed
I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Man, see, I'm already planning on watching it again because I know I miss stuff like that.
Yeah, it was cool.
And did you see where I think it was? I want to say it was Vintage LA pointed out that the establishing shot of Ciro's nightclub appeared to have been the same one used for, I think, the movie Bugsy.
I think so too. I think stock footage that they're selling now. It's funny
because they recreated the inside great, I thought. But I guess for the exterior they were just like, let's save a few $100,000.
Yeah, why not? It was a nondescript shot. Yeah, so
right.
Well, there's so much of that, after Tarantino did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, they did that other movie called Licorice Pizza that's out right now.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, and they're putting LA back again. And there was another show for Netflix, I forget what it's called, that put the Viper Room back as Filthy McNasties. They just shot that. And recently, and then I saw that movie recently last night in Soho, which I loved. And they did the same thing that Tarantino did in Hollywood in London, in Soho, which is insane because it's such a small place and it's never quiet there. I really enjoyed what they do when they put actual physical places back. That's pretty cool.
So I recommend everybody run out and see Being the Ricardos. It's on Amazon Prime. If you're a subscriber, you can watch it now.
Yeah. So what do you got going on for Christmas, Mike?
Well, there was just a COVID diagnosis in my family, so I am going to probably do a drive-by Christmas.
Just whip the presents out the window.
Wave and just kind of toss them like the newspaper. And keep going.
Gosh.
How about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. That sucks.
Yeah. How about you? What are you doing?
Do you have any personal tradition? I see all those decorations around your house. You're just decked out to the nines. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I put up a mid-century tinsel tree in my living room. Okay. It looks really nice, and I have all vintage ornaments from probably the 40s, 50s, 60s that I decorated with because I'm in the mid-century modern design and furniture. So, I put a tree up. That's the full effort.
Yeah, we got everything up and you
have a Santa hat on the Zoltar.
I do. Yeah. Well, actually, he's not. It just looks that way, but that's his feather.
Really?
But I do have lights. Yeah,
it looks like a Santa hat.
It actually does.
He's festive year round.
Year round. My Christmas tree, or Troy and I's Christmas tree, has two shipwrecks: the Titanic, the Edmund Fitzgerald. We have a piece of Jane Mansfield's car. We have a piece of Sharon Tate's house. We have all in ornaments. We have what else do we do? Well, I put up the Sharon Tate thing, Mae West's dental work, and this is all hanging on our tree. And Kentucky Fried Chicken barrels and buckets and we have the Del Rubio triplets heads. I don't know if you saw that on my Facebook page, but we have the wigs that they wore in the Pee-wee's Christmas special, along with the hats that they wore when they sang Winter Wonderland. So there's a drag queen in Vegas called James Mansfield who redoes wigs, and I contacted him and I said, do you want to mess with these wigs? And he took them and he reconstructed them and zhuzhed them to be the Del Rubio triplets. And I printed out their heads, their faces, mustaches and put them on wig forms, and it's really creepy because they do look like severed heads, and it wasn't intentional. I thought it was going to be, cute and lighthearted, and it looks a bit sinister, but still, it's
right.
So yeah, we have done it up. And also my favorite tradition is I thumb through my 1969 Sears Christmas wish book. When I was a kid, I used to live for these Christmas catalogs from department stores.
Me too.
And you just flick through them and make your list up, and you make a new one the next day and a new one the next day. This one has guns in it and real animal pelts.
What year is it for sale?
This is 69.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, you could buy real cheetah skin, leopard skin, for $700, which in 69 was a lot of money. Leopard. These are genuine albums, genuine skins of animals that they sell through the department store. I love that stuff.
Crazy.
It's so bad, but it's so interesting.
I actually have my grandfather's Sears and Roebuck .22 rifle.
Oh, nice.
From probably the 20s or 30s.
That's so cool. Do you ever take it out shooting?
When I was young, I did. When we lived in Colorado in the 90s, we went out and shot on our ranch a lot with it. I mean, it's just like a little squirrel rifle. It's not going to do a whole lot of damage, but it was fun to shoot. Not anymore. I wouldn't trust it now to shoot.
Mm-hmm.
But back then,
you definitely need to have it looked at if you're going to
You don't want your gun to blow up in your hand. That would be bad. Yeah. So now it's just nice to look at.
Right. Oh, cool. That's cool.
Do you want? Well, I mean, we're talking about holiday songs. Did you do you remember doing the Christmas concert as a kid for school? Did you ever have to do that?
Yeah.
It was fun going through these songs again because I noticed a few that I remember singing as a kid, and I'm like, oh, this must be why they were on the program. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, of course, is one. The secular songs, We Need a Little Christmas, and Up on the Rooftop, Click, 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 which is kind of a forgotten song, I feel like, other than I think it's only in kids' programming. I don't even know if they still do Christmas. They even do still holiday shows? I don't even know in elementary schools.
I don't know. I mean, I don't even have people don't even go to school anymore, so I don't. Let's do a Christmas Zoom concert. Yeah. But no, that was a big deal. I was in band, I was in orchestra, and I was singing. So I was all running around during those concerts doing all that stuff. But
what
I
instrument
loved
did you play in band?
It's clarinet. I still do.
We talked about this, I feel like.
Yeah.
I played alto sax.
Yeah.
So we were both
I love being in band. It was a lot of fun. That's something I'm always grateful for. My mom and dad let me do that, and learning how to read music and being able to interpret it. I love that, being able to do that. It's cool.
Right. Absolutely. So do you want to do you have any hate mail?
No. I didn't.
We'll save the hate for the Christmas songs at the end.
Yeah, let's do. No. I actually, you know what? Because we decided to do this so quickly, I've only researched the subjects. I know that there's a little bit of a cluster somewhere. Troy saves him, but most of the stuff is pretty pointless. You know I haven't got anything.
It's the season for giving, so we'll hold back on the hate mail and keep it mostly positive.
Okay. Well, except for the Christmas songs, we're going to be bashing in a few minutes.
We're going to bash the hell out of it at the end. Yeah. All right. Well, let's we'll start with the ones that we like, and
we're going to do the main feature right away.
The main feature is what I'm trying to say exactly.
It's time for the main feature.
So I guess so you and I have kind of picked our favorite classic Christmas singers.
Yeah.
Ones with the big famous hits. And so that's where we're going to go. We're going to talk about them and their songs and of course, the ends of their lives. And I guess kick off with kind of the king of Christmas, I think, Bing Crosby.
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly, I know for decades, I don't know if that's still the same anymore, that his White Christmas was the number one song in the world, ever. Guinness Book of World Records would always publish that.
I looked it up again. It is, to this day, it is the biggest selling single worldwide in history. It's 50 million sold.
You mean 50 billion, right?
50 million units sold.
Really?
Of
that
the
doesn't
song,
seem
yeah.
like very much. I mean, it sounds like a lot, of course, but for like 60 years.
The next highest one is Elton John's re-recording of Candle in the Wind for when Princess Diana died in 97. That sold like 33. That single sold like 33 million. So that's a pretty big gap between them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's actually hard for them to count because White Christmas came out, in the 40s, and it was before there were really pop charts. And so the record keeping isn't as thorough as, when Billboard came around and the other charts showed up later. So they've kind of given it, I think Guinness has kind of, to please fans of everyone, have kind of made it a tie between Elton John and Bing Crosby, but they're basically saying it's still Bing.
Well, you know what? It's funny because I was just doing research recently on, it's related, Michael Nesmith, who passed away very recently, of the Monkees. And Michael Nesmith was quite interesting in his innovations. He basically started MTV and the music videos, but he was also an integral part of getting UPC labels put on records to keep track of stock, because up until that point nobody was doing that. So the artists were getting these checks saying you had this amount sold, and there was no real accounting.
You just have to accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was an interesting part of all that, because he was like, no, we have to figure out what's going on exactly. And I thought that was interesting. So, yeah, it's interesting to think how many records may have been sold that are just not accounted for publicly. Yeah.
They have to research and kind of make estimated guesses. Over how much.
But I tell you, 50 million doesn't sound like as many. I thought it would have been more than that for some reason.
Yeah. So Bing, just a quick overview of him. He had 41 number one hits at least. In addition to being supposedly the third most popular actor in history as far as ticket sales go, behind only Clark Gable and John Wayne.
Interesting.
But his White Christmas was written by Irving Berlin for the musical Holiday Inn, not, as some people may think, for White Christmas, the musical that came a decade later. Holiday Inn came out in 1942 with Bing and Fred Astaire, and it won the Academy Award for Best Original Song, and it was first recorded before that film came out on Christmas Day in 1941, just 18 days after the Pearl Harbor attack. Bing performed it on the radio for the first time. And I think for a while they sold copies of that radio recording until he could do a proper studio recording of it a few months later. And it was the number one song for 11 weeks.
Wow. That's really something. I didn't know that about Pearl Harbor, but that, it certainly, it's much like the Diana song, it really tugged at people's heartstrings. They needed it at that time. A little bit different circumstances when you're talking about a war, and you're talking about a princess that got fired from her job, basically, but beloved. And so it's interesting. It's like not a knee jerk reaction, but an emotional comfort. I think
it was the right time and place for that song to hit, right? And Irving Berlin said he reportedly called his secretary, after he wrote the song at a hotel, and he over a weekend, and he reportedly called his secretary on like Monday and told her to write the song down, and said something along the lines of, not only is it it's the best song I've ever written, it's the best song ever written, or something like that. Like he instantly knew when he wrote it, like this is a huge hit. And Bing kind of didn't see it that way. Just when he recorded, he just thought, it's another song, I think. And then it went on to be this smash.
Well, he was an emotionally vacant individual, so I'm not surprised. I'm not totally surprised.
What else is interesting is that when Bing did that 1942 studio recording after doing the radio recording, but then in 1947 he re-recorded it. And they tried to, match up the orchestration and everything as faithfully as possible. But the 47 recording is actually the one that most people have probably actually heard the most, not the original 42 studio recording. And the way you can tell the difference, the easiest way is in the intro with like the flutes playing before you start singing. There is an instrument called a celeste, which looks like a piano, but it plays like chimes. And you hear that tinkle the kind of bell sounds right before you start singing. That's how you know you're hearing the 1947 version and not the older 42. Plus, I think the 47 version, just the quality of the recording is a little bit better.
Wow, that's fascinating. I didn't know any of that stuff. So, so when they made, you think they made the movie White Christmas, wrote it around the song that was such a success 10 years earlier? Guess.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, it's such a massive hit almost a decade later. They're like, we're making a whole movie out of this with Irving Berlin music, you know?
Because if you ask anyone, they would say, oh, yeah, that was featured in, White Christmas, of course. But it was actually, like almost 10 years earlier. Interesting. Mm-hmm. I remember that song. Well, it struck a big chord. I remember my grandma, my granny, she was born in 1889. My God, to think, to know that.
Wait, you have a grandparent born in the 1800s?
Both 1889 and 1888 were my grandfather and my grandmother. Yeah. So, and that's what makes me wish I would have, if I'd have thought to talk to him more about it, because they died in the 70s. You know what I mean? I was around. I remember them very well. But my granny, that was her song, and Troy's too. In fact, Troy saw to it that the White Christmas was played at his grandmother's funeral because it was her favorite song, and it was like in the middle of June or something, But it was like, no, we're playing this, because that was her song. So it was really sweet. But yeah, it meant a lot to a lot of people.
So Bing was a hugely successful businessman, probably one of the most successful businessmen in the history of Hollywood actors. I didn't know this. He was a principal stockholder in Minute Maid orange juice.
that figures.
Of his many huge business ventures that he was a part of. He also had numerous mob associations. Unlike Sinatra, wasn't very open about it. But he was a bit of a gambling addict, and there were several times, I guess, when he owed thousands in gambling debts to some bad people that would have killed him if he didn't pay it back, and had to borrow money in order to do it. So he really put his life in risk. But he was an avid gambler and an avid golfer. Those were like his two hobbies, I think.
And a womanizer. And, he was he was a piece of work, he was. But
you want to go into all that?
Well, but also what I found interesting, I did a quick, I looked at his Wikipedia page, and I didn't realize he was pro-pot. He was trying to legalize marijuana, which I think is really interesting. Of all people, who's probably, hippies, and I hate hippies. Yeah, he was, a pot smoker, really, as far as
he was very anti-alcohol. I think he blamed alcohol for the death of his first wife and told his kids stay away from it. And was basically like smoke pot instead. That was, I think that's why he was pro marijuana, because alcohol was so damaging.
Interesting. Wow.
But his son Gary wrote an infamous book about Bing in 1983 called Going My Own Way, which really, I think, set in stone the negative perception a lot of people have of Bing. Basically child abuse that it was alleged against all his kids.
Yeah, well, how many children? 2 of 4, committed sue. Two of his sons
who used to perform with him.
they shotgun wounds to the head, self-inflicted, and I don't know. I mean, I've never heard anything good about him personally. He was a great performer, a great entertainer. He was part of that Bob Hope Brigade, who was another one who famously treated people like hell. They used to swap girlfriends, they say, and treated women like garbage and like pieces of meat, basically. And also, his abuse, the stuff that they say he did, I can't dismiss it. Because it's not like the Christina Crawford thing, which a lot of people just thought was BS from the start. But there's a lot of information in there that I don't know. I wasn't there, but I can see that happening. I didn't know the people, so
yeah, it seems to depend on which sibling you talk to, because a daughter and one of his other sons came out. Well, a daughter came out and said that Gary, who wrote the book, had admitted to her that he had exaggerated things because the publisher pushed him to do it because they would sell more books if it was more salacious. And another one of his sons really didn't like Gary and called him a whining, bitching crybaby. But then other ones seemed to be more like either wouldn't say one way or the other, or were kind of like, yeah, there were bad times, but we choose to remember the good times. It wasn't all bad being around him. But Bing even kind of blamed himself in an interview for not being a good dad and for maybe being too strict with his kids.
I mean, it was a different time. My grandparents were very strict. I mean, there wasn't a lot of joy, around them. I mean, not saying they weren't happy people, but they were very strict, Catholic people, and you rule by the, I don't want to say rule by the fist. It doesn't make sense, but we weren't strangers to getting hit when we were kids, getting punished, not humiliated like they say that, Bing did to his kids.
Whipping them with belts until they bled.
Calling him fat ass and lard ass and
introducing him that way to like his professional associates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humiliating. I mean, they said that, well, Gary, I think in his book said that they used to, they said they'd leave a pair of underwear laying around. Bing would make them tie it around their neck and wear it for the whole day.
Or shoes or something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, humiliating. And so that is certainly, I mean, there's something to be said about punishment. And it's like, oh, I won't do that again. But then there's humiliation. And that's a totally different ballgame, I think. It's like teachers when they used to make you sit in the corner or stand in a wastebasket or do whatever, sit there with chewing gum on your nose. I mean, it was just like humiliating. And maybe that was the point, but that was the point. It just was, borderline abusive. And as I said, well, it wasn't borderline. It was abusive. And, as I said, 2 out of 4 of his kids committed suicide. And also, when he died, he put in his will that they can't inherit anything until they're 65 years old.
Yeah,
they get no inheritance.
Like at least 2 or 3 of his kids didn't even live to be that age. Like
3 of his kids died before then. So it's like a final FU. I don't know. I just have not heard very many nice things about him.
I would get the inheritance thing if it was not 65, but like say 40. Or something like basically saying, look, you can't just turn 21 and coast the rest of your life on the family money. You got to go do something with your life and not be a jerk. Yeah. But 65, come on, man. It's a bit, especially when you grow up in the lap of luxury and then you're just tossed out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think one of the sons killed himself. They said one of the reasons was that he discovered that his inheritance was gone or something like that. And so that was it. He was already distraught and whatever. But Bing died on a golf course in Spain on October 14th, 1977, of a massive heart attack while walking back to the clubhouse after playing 18 holes. His last words were supposedly, "That was a great game of golf, fellas. Let's go have a Coca-Cola." And then he dropped dead right in front of him. He was 74.
Well, on the way to the proverbial 19th hole, right, on the way to the clubhouse.
Yes,
and he, they shipped him back here, and his body was handled by that mortuary on Fountain and Western. It's now like they call it Covenant Houses for Kids, Runaway Kids. But that's the same one that handled Divine, and they handled the Shalimar. It was Shalimar who was Eddie Murphy's prostitute that committed suicide,
or accidentally fell,
5-story building. Yeah. And they handled her, but the guy who was playing, that was a kid that was working at the mortuary at the time, snuck a photograph of Bing Crosby in his casket and sold it to the Inquirer. And now, there's a picture of Bing Crosby in his casket all over the world because of this kid who, did nothing at that point except lose his job. And, right. But nowadays, they'd be raked over the coals and sued and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so there is a picture of Bing Crosby in his casket floating around the internet because of this kid.
It seems to be there was a dispute over how old Bing was when he died.
Oh, yeah.
Because the Wikipedia says he's 74, and that seems to be the most commonly accepted age. But if you go back and read the original news reports from 77, they said he was 73. And his grave marker says he was born in 1904, which would make him 73, when supposedly he was actually born in 1903.
Let me look at his death certificate and see what that says, because that's the most, quote unquote official document. But give me a second here.
Both the LA Times and the New York Times said he was 73, but they were probably both citing the same source, so who knows?
Yeah. And since he died in Spain, I don't have his Spanish death certificate. So,
right.
So unfortunately, but yeah, so it's interesting. I don't know. It wouldn't be difficult to find out when he was born because those records are kept here. And but as far as his death goes, well, that would be it. I mean, we know when he was born, so we could figure it out.
Right. It would be interesting though if his grave marker has the wrong birth year.
Mm-hmm.
And he's buried in Holy Cross over in Culver City.
Just a few steps from Bela Lugosi and Sharon Tate and Rita Hayworth and the Tin Man, Jack Haley. In fact, I think he's like right next to Jack Haley or very close to him anyway. But yeah, Holy Cross Catholic Cemetery. A lot of great people in that cemetery. Mm-hmm. And Bing. And then there's Bing.
And Bing. Apparently the last song he ever performed for an audience was Strangers in the Night. He performed it for construction workers that were doing construction near the golf course the day he died. And they recognized him and asked for a song, and he sang Strangers in the Night. And then
interesting.
Died, an hour later or whatever. Yeah.
Huh. Wow.
I also didn't realize this. I didn't know his granddaughter is Denise Crosby, who was Tasha Yar on Star Trek Next Generation.
Okay, that one's not on my radar at all.
Early seasons of Star Trek, and then she asked to be killed off. She didn't want to do it, so they killed her. Yeah.
Kill me now. Wow.
She does she produces the Trekkies documentaries, though.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
You're a bit of you're a Trekkie nerd, aren't you?
I'm not. I don't know. I might. No, I wouldn't consider myself like a Trekkie. No.
Okay.
I do watch. I watch the shows, but I'm not like a hardcore. I haven't seen all of them.
Yeah. Oh, and back to Lucy. And I mean, Lucy produced it. So if it wasn't for Lucy, we probably wouldn't have Star Trek, at least not in the incarnation we know it. So
absolutely. Yep. So look, was he a jerk? Wasn't he a jerk? Either way, rest in peace, Bing Crosby.
Well, wait.
Oh,
we forgot to bring up the most. Not, I don't want to say it. It's Bing as a human being is it's up to the gods, I guess, to figure that out or to deal with all of that. But Bing as the man who sang "Little Drummer Boy" with David Bowie, that I will never forget. One of the worst Christmas songs, in my opinion, ever recorded. First of all, Little Drummer Boy, I think, is one of the worst songs ever because I can't, as soon as I hear dun, dun and it's like dun, no, I can't. Mm-hmm. I despise every single version of that song. But him and David Bowie is just agony to sit through.
It's such a bizarre pairing.
Yeah. But really, I'm sure Bing had no time for Bowie, and it was just a grab for, viewers or whatever, the network. But it was just a weird pairing and a weird recording, and I just despise that song, and I hate that version more than any. There, I said
it. Fight me.
Oh, come on, I dare you. No, that's a tough song to sit through because it's agony. It goes on forever and ever. And anyway.
Oh, you got your tab.
Oh, yeah.
You still have your supplies.
I am just, they're precious to me. They are precious. I only got a few left.
All right. I was going to go into Andy Williams next.
I like Andy Williams.
You like Andy Williams?
Yeah, a lot.
Okay, yeah. I feel like he and Bing are kind of the voice of Christmas. I don't know. There's something about their voices that just instantly, and I guess probably because they that's how their career kind of shook out too. Because Andy went on. Not only did he record "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year," of course, which is I think kind of written for him and part of his Christmas album, but then he did those TV specials in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They were all Christmas themed. So I think I saw his nickname was Mr. Christmas. As a result. Yeah. He had a few connections to Bing. Andy and his brothers sang with Bing in 1944 on Bing's record, Swinging on a Star.
I like that song.
One of Andy's main homes, at least later in his life, was in La Quinta, California, which is largely believed where Irving Berlin wrote White Christmas. Although I think there's a resort in Phoenix that also claims it happened there. And then, of course, they were both avid golfers, which is like a running theme for a lot of these guys.
I like Andy Williams so much. There's not much about him that I've ever heard that was negative, you know. And I enjoyed his specials. He's more or less responsible for the Osmond brothers being known because he featured them on his show all the time. And of course, Moon River from Breakfast at Tiffany was a classic. I mean, he has some great music. He really did, and I know I like him very much. The music to watch the girls go by. I love that song but you know when that song, Most Wonderful Time of the Year, I never really got it. There's that verse where there'll be something and scary ghost stories and, you know, lots of good cheer. And it's like, well, wait, what?
Back up, back the truck up. Ghost stories. I guess Scrooge, scary. Maybe? Is it a Scrooge reference?
Well, that's what, yeah, it took me years to figure it out, but it was A Christmas Carol. But it was, but it was like I was like, scary ghost stories. It was thrown in there. Like, what? Something else, there's a song that they consider a Christmas song that I don't, is My Favorite Things, by Julie Andrews, you know,
really?
These are a few of my favorite. They say that's a Christmas song, and I can't. When the dog bites, when the bee stings,
I don't think
you know.
So. I don't think I've ever considered it that. No.
They do say it is. Yeah, it's like Die Hard being a Christmas movie. That'll be argued forever. But
right. What's your stance on that?
Yeah, what's mine? I saw it once, so I can't say I embrace it as such.
I mean, it's hard because it takes place at Christmas, during Christmas, you know, Christmas season, and there is, I think, Christmas music plays at the end or whatever. I mean, but just because the setting is Christmas time, does that make it a Christmas movie? Open to interpretation. It's not like Home Alone. Home Alone is a Christmas movie.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it, is to get home by Christmas or go. Right. Yeah, right.
So I don't know that I would. I don't know how I'm on the fence on the Die Hard Christmas movie debate.
Yeah, I don't have any stake in that argument. I really don't.
Oh, I thought this was interesting. So his Christmas album, the Andy Williams Christmas album, is what it was called, the one that came out in the 60s. You know, It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year, which was like his track, his song. He kind of originated it, I think. You would think that's the one they would lead with, but they actually led with his version of White Christmas. That's the first single that they released to promote it. And I almost wonder if that kind of show. I mean, that's 2 decades after that song first came out. I think it almost shows like how big White Christmas was. That's what they would lead with, not the original song that Andy became known for Christmas, you know.
I guess, you know, whoever he worked for, whoever his studio was, they were just like, you know. I remember I was talking to Annie Lennox one time. We were talking about...
Yes, okay.
No, it was when they were before the Eurythmics. They were in a group called the Tourists, and she and Dave Stewart, and there were another 2 people. And I love the Tourists. I mean, they're kind of a psychedelic band. And the first time I ever saw them was in a music video where Annie was singing. They sang "I Only Want to Be with You," that Dusty Springfield song. So when I had the opportunity to meet Annie Lennox, I wanted to ask her something that wasn't like, I really love your work. I wanted to talk about something in particular. So I wanted to ask about the Tourists. And I said, well, you know, I first heard you when you did I Only Want to Be With You. She goes, when I heard that song, I cried because I didn't want to do it. My record company insisted I do it. They made us do a cover tune on the record, and they pushed that as our first single. So that's probably what they did. The record company's just like, we're going to use that single. We own it already. Maybe it'll be, you know, become something.
Yeah, they were probably like, look, it's a tried and true Christmas standard.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what White Christmas is. Nobody knows what this new song is that you just recorded. So let's lead with the standard, you know, your cover of a standard and not, you know.
Yeah. Again,
that's probably
what water from a turnip or whatever that expression is, you know, get it, you know, use it up.
Right. Totally. He went on to record 8 Christmas albums. And did multiple TV Christmas specials. I think he did every year through the 70s and then kind of intermittently in the 80s and 90s. I thought it was interesting, you know, he seems like he was a pretty good guy, but he had several weird tragedies around him. First, he was good friends with RFK and was apparently there at the Ambassador when the assassination happened.
Really?
Yep. And then went on to sing at Kennedy's funeral. Bobby Kennedy's funeral.
Wow, no, I've never heard that one. That's interesting.
Yep. Huh. And then it's crazy, right? Yeah. And then also weirdly, his ex-wife, after they divorced, she killed her boyfriend that she was living with in 1976, the pro skier Spider Savage. Yeah. She killed him in Aspen. Yeah. Shot him. I guess Andy Williams was still close with her and was a character witness at her trial and everything, and she basically got 30 days for killing this guy. She claimed it was an accident.
There was that. I mean, that was a big deal back then. I remember that really vividly when that was all going on, and because they were, they're both like young, good-looking people, Spider Savage and Claudine Lange, and Andy Williams certainly upped the. If it wasn't for his association, it probably wouldn't have had the attention that it did. There was, I remember this really vividly. There was on Saturday Night Live while the trial was going on, there was They were doing, they showed like the slope skiing down the slopes and they would have people, the agony of defeat when they had the Sunday morning or the Sunday sports, whatever it was, they always showed the Olympic skier falling or, spinning out of control and hitting some kind of snowbank. So on Saturday Night Live, they had somebody doing a blow by blow of somebody skiing down a hill. And then as soon as they took off, they lost their whatever path and flew into the woods. They'd say, oh, another skier accidentally shot by Claudine Lange. and then there'd be another one coming down and you hear this pow. Oh, another singer accidentally skier sunk.
That's hilarious. Well, she claimed that he was trying to show her how to use the gun. Mm-hmm. But he was shot in the bathroom and was apparently getting ready to take a shower. So yeah, she just got something of reckless endangerment or some lesser charge is what they ended up convicting her of.
It's interesting. I mean, you've handled weapons before, and if you have a gun, I mean, sometimes you just touch the trigger and boom, it's gone. Yeah. And it happens. I'm not. So if it was accidental, I can kind of see it happening because they are so. Guns could be so sensitive.
Yeah, sometimes guns have very sensitive hair triggers, and it happened to me once. I was at a shooting range, and it was like a competitive shooting guns we were shooting with, and you want to talk about light triggers. And luckily, I mean, I always keep the barrel pointed down range, but it did go off when I wasn't ready to. And I was like, holy cow, I'd never had that kind of experience before. So it can happen, but I don't know, man.
Just in recent news, there was that other shooting on set. And, I can kind of see, ultimately, it's you have the weapon in your hands and you had your finger on the trigger. So ultimately, it's down to you. But then again, those people aren't marksmen. They don't, they probably don't spend much time in a shooting range. They don't realize that, you never pointed at somebody. I know on the movie set it's different, but it just.
Yeah, I mean, the rule of thumb is don't ever point your gun at someone you don't want to shoot and don't shoot someone you don't want to kill.
Yeah.
So it goes down to they call it flagging. When your barrel points at a person, you just flag them with your gun. It's bad. You never want to even accidentally, just in passing, if you're moving the gun from one place to another, accidentally point in anyone's direction. But with movies, obviously, if you're pointing the gun at the camera, there's going to be a person there holding the camera, so you can't get around it. But I don't know. She got off with a license, and I think she only had to do the 30 days like on weekends because they were sensitive to her like being able to spend time with her kids. So,
isn't that nice?
Yeah.
There you
are. So Andy Williams died on September 25th, 2012 from bladder cancer. He was 84. And I think, is he the one that owned the place in or is it someone else who had the place in Branson,
that was him.
Right? That's where his ashes
Moon River
were spread.
Theater, He owned the Moon River Theater in Branson. Mm-hmm. And that's where they say he's scattered in the river in the actual Moon River in front of his theater.
Right.
So,
That's nice.
If they ever tear it down, there's that. All those people, they like get their ashes, put in fountains and things like that. It's like, well, something's going to happen to it. It's just going to end up in some drain somewhere. But symbolically, it's just
symbolism.
Yeah. But I liked Andy Williams, and I love his Christmas album. I listen to all his albums. I think he did the best version of Windy. No, I shouldn't say that. I love that song. I love everyone who's done that. But yeah, I do like him. So rest in peace, Andy Williams.
Rest in peace, Andy Williams. Perry Como.
Were you a fan?
I mean, I like his Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, I don't know,
Let's skip it then.
Oh, don't want to talk about it?
No. He was the one I hoped you had something on, because all I have is...
I just really like Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas.
Yeah. I like Perry Como. I mean, Perry Como is one of those people to me that I could skip. I mean, no, I'm saying right now, I'm just saying he sounds like a whole lot of other singers. There's nothing about his voice that was distinctive to me. Every time I hear him on the radio, I'm like, who is that? I would never say Perry Como, because I don't know his sound that well.
This has turned into a Perry Como bashing episode.
No, not at all. I like what I hear. I just don't, it's just not distinctive.
Yeah, I know, it's generic, kind of generic sounding, I guess. Yeah. He, I just thought it was interesting that much like Andy Williams, he hosted Christmas TV specials regularly. Mm-hmm. He did it for 40 years, going back to 1948, like the early days of television. He was doing the Christmas specials. And I'll just say quickly, he died on May 12th, 2001 in his sleep, possibly from Alzheimer's. He was 88.
88. Yeah, his career, I know that it was like 50 years he'd been working in radio and television and recording. I mean, he's certainly got like 5 Emmys, I think, is what he had in his career. So he's certainly a significant performer. He just never spoke to me personally. And that's not, nothing against the dude.
All right. Let's talk about, let's get a girl into the show here. Ella Fitzgerald.
Ella.
Who recorded 2 Christmas albums, 1960's Ella Wishes You a Swinging Christmas, and 67's Ella Fitzgerald's Christmas. The swinging one, the first one was more secular songs, and then the second album was more religious themes and carols and stuff.
Yeah, I wasn't too familiar with her Christmas stuff until you mentioned it the other day, and I listened to her albums. They're really, I mean, she doesn't record poorly at all, Right. I mean, she's amazing, and I thought I liked her Christmas music a lot. Yeah, I like her a lot, though. She's a fascinating lady.
Her Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas recording from the 1960 album is really popular. You hear that all the time. In fact, I was just watching the conclusion of the Hawkeye series, the Marvel series on Disney Plus. And that at the end of the season finale, like toward the end, that's the song they play is Ella Fitzgerald's "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." It's just one of those standards that says what time of year it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought that was
I love that song. There's a weird part of that song that really kind of gets me choked up. It was something she said, "If the fates allow." And I was like, that was, and sometimes if you're down, you're really, or something happened, in your life. And during that, it just sort of, it strikes an emotional chord. I always thought that was kind of a little, a little emotional moment in that song. It's a sweet song. So she did this really famous ad, and I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s for Memorex cassette tapes, and it was is it real or is it Memorex? And she would do scat, which means something to some people, but scat is a form of jazz where you just kind of off the cuff you just scoobity doo bop bop, that kind of
words,
stuff.
Yeah, like Mel Torme was a famous scat singer.
Yes, and so and Ella did this, and she did this, and she in this commercial she's singing into a microphone, and then she hits a note at the end of it, doobie, like that, and then the glass in front of her breaks, and then they play the recording on a Memorex tape with next to the glass, and it breaks during the tape again. Too. It pops apart. Yeah. So the ad campaign was, is it real or is it Memorex? And
that's awesome.
It was a cool ad. It's probably on YouTube, but it's a cool ad. There's somebody that had health issues, isn't she? I mean, she lived next to Jackie Stallone.
Really?
Yeah. Her last home, she lived next door to Jackie Stallone. I mean, those are bananas. Jackie Stallone is another piece of work. But yeah, so she had diabetes, and she had been, her last recording was in 1991. Her last performance was in 1993. Slow decline. She ultimately had to have both of her legs amputated below the knee. I remember because this was on, I was past her house every day back then on tours, and I would see her get loaded into a van every once in a while in front of her house, and ultimately she died in that house. Now, there was a guy that I used to work with at Starline Tours, and he was a musician, and he told me this story, and it was like one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. And I can't imagine this guy made it up, because it's such a good story, and this guy was not a grandstander, he wasn't somebody that needed to brag about stuff, but he was a part of a band, like a quartet, a jazz quartet that would play, and they were hired to play at a private home in Beverly Hills, and they were told to sit up in a living room, set up their equipment in the living room, and they sat and they played for an hour, and nobody was there. They were just playing for nobody. And after their hour was finished, they were leaving, and they asked them to come back the next day, and they said, "This is actually Ella Fitzgerald's house, and she's upstairs, and she's not expected to last long." So they had her come back. They had them come back the next day. And according to this guy who I worked with, he said while they were playing, he says when they found out who they were playing, they found Ella Fitzgerald songs. They rehearsed them during the day, and they went back and they performed that night. And they say, there's a storybook ending that she passed away during that hour that they were playing that night. But it's just an awesome story that they didn't even know. They were just playing to an empty room, and the first night. So that was kind of a sweet story.
Yeah, she passed away on June 15th, 1996, and technically it was a stroke, but it was, I'm sure related to the diabetes issues. And she was 79, and she is buried in Inglewood Park Cemetery, which is where my grandparents are buried.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're buried. They're actually buried they're buried at like the very south end of the cemetery, right across the street from the Forum, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So whenever I go to Rams games, I drive by my grandparents.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, rest in
Ella?
peace. Yeah, I think that's Ella.
Rest in peace, Ella Fitzgerald. Okay, so we have one of your favorite subjects ever to talk about, the Carpenters.
Yeah, Karen.
And Merry Christmas, Darling was their 1970 single, and then Christmas Portrait was their Christmas album from 1978.
Mm-hmm. I love that album. That was such a great album. I like the Carpenters, yeah. So I'm not going to hate the album at all. But I did. It was just one of those comfort. They were a comfort group. They were 70s easy listening, and that was an era that I enjoyed being in very much. And they did one of my favorite songs, Happy Holiday, another Irving Berlin song. They start off their album with that. And I like that song a lot. They're just awesome. They were such great, interesting people. And Richard was really another one that's quite innovative with the recording process, and they got the overdubbing, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And the Carpenters I think they were only in operation until Karen's death in 83. And, but yeah, they've released several albums since then of Carpenters music that have been remastered and done by an orchestra, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
So Richard is, still doing quite well with new Carpenters recordings. But they did. Now, one of the songs I don't like from Christmas at all was called Little Altar Boy that Karen did. And that I hear it occasionally on the radio on the Christmas stations too. The song was actually recorded in 78 for that Christmas album, but they didn't release it until like a year after Karen died. So just kind of it as a promotion
it didn't make the cut.
No, I think they were re-releasing the Christmas album remastered after Karen's death, and they used it to promote that. But they released a lot of Karen stuff after she died. It's even her album, her own solo album that she did when Richard was in the hospital. She decided to cut an album without him, and that was a really bad thing. And Richard listened to it and said it was a piece of garbage, and she shelved it. And because she was too humiliated by what he had to say about it. That's my interpretation But the facts are she recorded the solo album and she shelved it. So it wasn't until after she was dead that Richard finally released the solo album, which isn't bad at all, and said in the liner notes, basically, oh, well, I didn't like it then, I didn't like it now, but here, for what it's worth, this is what she wanted you to hear, and released the album. So it's kind of a crappy thing to do, but anyway, we have it and it's out there, and poor Karen. So we love Karen.
Is that all you have on the Carpenters and Christmas?
Yeah. It just I miss doing that tour. We every year on the anniversary or the weekend closest to the anniversary, we did the Karen Carpenter tour, and we would visit all
the Karen Carpenter tour.
Yeah,
and we show the house, because the house is still there, and the apartments that they owned are still there.
The apartments, their house where they moved afterwards, the people that handled the band, where the school where they were in band. The Carpenter Center down in Long Beach has her drum set on display. They have the Richard and Karen Carpenter not entertainment, but it's in Long Beach. It's they do proper concerts and stuff. But if you walk in, they have like the Karen's drums and her lead sister shirt, and a lot of their the Richard's piano and the sheet music to Only Just Begun, and a lot of their Grammys and stuff like that. It's really cool that they have that stuff that you can see. So we used to hit that on the tour too, and then ultimately end up at her gravesite, which had she was moved. She was in Forest Lawn, Cypress originally, in a beautiful grave at the end of a hallway, and it was a wonderful looking beautiful grave at the end of the hall, and her parents were buried there too. And then Richard left Downey and moved to Thousand Oaks, I think it is, and had Karen exhumed and her parents and took them up that way. So now she's in the valley at another cemetery, and Richard has space for himself and his family. So that was kind of a weird thing. But her gravestone does say a star on earth and a star in heaven, which I think is quite sweet. Nice. Yeah.
So, she died on February 4th, 1983. She was 32. She apparently basically died in her bedroom closet at her childhood home, was where she was found collapsed anyways. I think cause of death was ruled as being related to her anorexia.
Yeah, it was heart failure due to her eating disorder. Mm-hmm. It's very and that movie they did, the Karen Carpenter story. Did we ever talk about that?
I don't know if we've talked about that. We talked about it on because our first Dearly Departed documentary, we did a whole Carpenters section.
Oh, that's right, we did. Yeah,
we went down there and showed all those places. Yeah. But I don't know that we've talked about it on this show.
Well, they did the Karen Carpenter story that was addressing anorexia nervosa for the very first time, and it was a TV movie, and it was really Richard is the one who produced it, and it was quite raw in that regard, where he showed his parents being kind of emotionally vacant, and him being he went into rehab for a drug addiction, for Quaaludes, and Karen's insecurities with her weight. And it was odd because they actually filmed it in the Carpenter's home. The woman who played Cynthia Gibson, I think was her name, who played Karen, wore all of Karen's real clothes. When the ambulance came to the house, they used the real ambulance and the real ambulance drivers to go to the house. And it was just and they filmed her body being taken down the stairs and taken out into the ambulance in the house that it actually took place in. It's bizarre. Louise Fletcher plays the mother in the movie, and they filmed on the A&M Records lot in the studio where they actually recorded on La Brea, where you used to work. Yep. And so it was pretty good, pretty wild historically movie.
So I believe the recording studio that they recorded in there on La Brea, I believe that studio is still there, and it's kind of known as the Carpenters studio. Mm-hmm. Obviously, thousands of acts have recorded in there since. But I believe that's the one that is said to be haunted.
It was somebody that you knew that told that story, wasn't it?
Yeah, because I worked on the Jim Henson lot for about a year and a half. Probably 15 years ago.
Pardon me one second. I just want to interrupt you for just a second to set the stage.
Sure.
That was A&M Records is now the Jim Henson studio, originally built by Charlie Chaplin. So it's been around since like the 20s when there was nothing but orange groves around there. So it's still the original studio there, and Chaplin built it for his own film productions.
Yeah, and if you've ever seen the Chaplin film, with the biography with Robert Downey Jr., toward the end when he's an old man and he's coming back for the Oscars, and he's in the limo or whatever, or the Rolls Royce or whatever he's in, they pull up in front of his old studio for a second so he can see it one more time. That is the actual Chaplin studio lot.
I love that.
But now it has a Kermit the Frog dressed as the tramp on the roof.
Which is nice. It's a good nod.
Tipping his hat to the Crazy Girl strip club across the street. That's funny.
And Chaplin's footprints are in the cement in there too.
They're still in the concrete. If you know where to look, they're between the restrooms. It's kind of an old there's like a building in the middle of the courtyard, which is where the restrooms are. And there's if you know where to look from the sidewalk leading from there toward the entrance to the recording studio, it was very, very faint. This was 15 years ago, so who even knows now? You could still see the footprints where he did the tramp walk. Down the sidewalk, and that's what supposedly inspired Sid Grauman to do the Grauman's Chinese Theater handprint and footprints, because he saw that Chaplin had done that. Yeah,
that's really cool. So, what about the ghost story?
So, I believe that it was in the Carpenters studio, but someone who worked there, I remember, was telling me this one time. That it's a 24-hour-a-day operation. There's bands there all the time. Basically, and I'll be recording at 3:00 in the morning, and I think it was the Carpenters when they at like 2:30 in the morning. Whatever local employee was working with them said, "Okay, take a lunch break. We got to shut down for like 30 minutes." And the producer, or whoever with the band, was like, "Whoa! I say when that happens, kind of deal." And they said we can't record between like 2:30 and 3 a.m. or something because the recordings always get messed up. And they were like, yeah, nonsense. And they said, yeah, everybody says that, so we've kept one of the recordings that got messed up. And they played the recording back, and they said it sounds like a room full of people, just voices on top of voices on top of voices. And even though, it wasn't like there's a party going on, but nobody was in there. And so that is what was told to me while I worked there, was that studio was haunted.
So did you I think you told me that before anyone does a recording session there, they play I believe
that is the other thing, that's all to kind of appease the ghosts. Yes, they play a Carpenter song before every recording in that studio. Yep.
That's cool. I love that. Yep. And if anything else, to acknowledge probably the most famous artist from A&M, aside from Herb Alpert, but the Carpenters were a huge star for A&M, so it's nice that they get acknowledgement there. And Chaplin gets the shout out with the Muppet, with the with the Kermit the Frog at the front with the hat and the cane. So it's nice that the history is being acknowledged there. I hope that's still the case.
Also, I believe that George Harrison founded his Dark Horse Records on that same lot.
Oh, interesting.
In the 70s.
Huh. Cool.
That's also something I heard while I worked there. We saw Paul McCartney there one time.
Wow.
We used to see we saw Chris Cornell, we saw Rod Stewart, Ashley Simpson. Not quite.
Oh no,
the same
really?
level.
Oh my god! How did you contain yourself?
You had me. I wasn't interested until you said Ashley Simpson. Paul McCartney was totally cool. A couple of people I worked with went over and talked to him and had like a nice conversation with them, and yeah. But yeah, that was a wild place to work for sure. They were always doing weird stuff, and then plus the Muppets were there. I think the main Muppet factory, like where the workshop, is in New York. But they also have what they call the Muppet Barn at the Hinson lot there, where they are working on other stuff. Yeah. Because they use that soundstage there to film Muppet related things too. So,
I saw that show there called Muppet Up. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think so, no.
That's where I met. It was weird. I met Jim Henson Jr. there, and he talks like Kermit. It's the most bizarre thing. But
when I worked at the lot, he still had an office there. We used to see him.
It's
around
a really nice guy.
Yeah,
but this Muppet
totally.
Up is improv, and it's all they have like a cast of 6 people and a slew of props and puppets, and somebody throws out an idea and they do the Muppets, but not the famous Muppets because it's filthy. I mean, it's really filthy. It's really edgy and very, very funny. But it is a proper Muppet production without any of their big names. And I say Jim Jr. was there. So, but it's fascinating. I don't know if they've ever done a documentary on that. Probably wouldn't let them, but because people would be upset. But, it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So rest in peace, Karen Carpenter. Next up, Nat King Cole, who recorded an album in 1960, same as Ella Fitzgerald's first album. His album was called The Magic of Christmas, and it is the only Christmas album that Cole ever released. And what's interesting is his most famous Christmas song, which is now like one of the most famous Christmas songs ever, called The Christmas Song, was not on that album. They did not record it until a year later, and it ended up being such a huge hit that when they reissued the Magic of Christmas album in '63, a few years later, they renamed it The Christmas Song and added that track to it because it had become such a huge smash hit by that point.
It is, yeah, it's the definitive version, most certainly. And a lot of people don't even know it's called The Christmas Song. But they would say, the chestnuts roasting on open fire, that one.
Right.
And it's funny. But yeah, Nat certainly has the most recognized version of that song, which is also interesting because it was written by Mel Torme, not even written by,
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mel Torme wrote it, made a fortune on it. But but the definitive recording was Nat King Cole's recording.
And if Bing owned the 40s and 50s when it came to Christmas music, Nat King Cole owned the 60s. It was the biggest selling Christmas album of the decade, I believe, was his.
And it's nice they feature him on that big mural on the side of Capitol Records.
Right.
I love that. I think
the
that's
house
so
that
cool.
Nat built,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's neat. And he was born in Alabama and always into music. Came to Los Angeles, and of course we know became very successful. Very successful in a very short period of time because he died really young.
Right.
But he had very famously purchased that home on June Street in Hancock Park, and Hancock Park had, for the old people, the old family people in Hancock Park, people that had old money, people that have inherited them, houses that have been in the same families for, 80 years, still have the documentation that when you bought a house in Hancock Park, there were, no Jews and no blacks, was literally in the paperwork.
For the homeowners association or whatever, yeah. Yeah,
and Nat, was the first black person to move in, and then there's the story about somebody burning a cross on his lawn. I don't know if that's true, but he certainly had an issue with.
Yeah, they wanted
moving.
Him out, and were very vocal about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that famous story about them. They came and knocked on his door and said, "We don't want any undesirables in this neighborhood," and he said, "I don't either." And I'll let you know if I see any.
Yeah, I love that story. So, he certainly, anyone that of color, anyone back in that period of time had a lot of other issues aside from just trying to break into the industry, which is hard enough to do, to make that, that kind of successful where everyone was buying their records and having them in their record collection was a bigger accomplishment than a lot of other people could claim,
Yeah. My grandfather, who grew up in Glendale, he told me that he told me when I shot my Euler House documentary, which was about him and the architect Richard Neutra, he told me when we were filming that he growing up in Glendale and being in LA, he and my grandma, when they were kind of first together, they would go see Nat King Cole play at a club. He said it was on Normandy. And I believe he specifically said in the Hollywood area. So I haven't done the research to find out where that would have been. But yeah, my grandpa was really proud of the fact that he saw Nat King Cole play before he was super famous. Probably would have been the 40s, would be my guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Normandy, that would be probably around Wilshire, because I don't think there were any clubs around Normandy in Hollywood at that point, but there were, because it was so close to the Ambassador Hotel. And there were a lot of nightclubs around that area, I think. So that's fascinating. That would have been a real accomplishment. That would have been something to see.
For sure. How memorable.
I
mean, I love the before they were famous type of stories, and what a great one to have.
Yeah.
My grandmother, when the last few years of her life, she had really bad dementia. She had Alzheimer's and sundowners, I think, which is it's the horrible combination. And so, at the end, she didn't really remember much, obviously. But she was such a big jazz music fan when she was younger. She still knew all the jazz songs. And I remember she sang Stardust for us one time, which was a huge Nat King Cole hit. And, even if she didn't know who was in the room with her, even though they were, her lifelong family members, she still remembered every single word of Stardust.
Isn't that funny? Music is so powerful.
The power of music, 100%. Yeah.
What is Sundowners? I've never heard of that.
Sundowners is, I believe, a form of dementia that it impacts you more late in the day, which is why it's called Sundowners. So people with Sundowners might be great in the morning and middle of the day, and then, getting toward the end of the day, they start to get foggy. That's how I understand it. And I think Alzheimer's kind of affects you all the time. So to have both at the same time was a bad combination. So
wow.
Yeah.
Nat, of course, was a big-time smoker, cigarette smoker. And ultimately it claimed him. And he died on February 15th, 1965. He was only 45 years old. In 65. Yeah. It's so sad. And, very famously had a daughter, Natalie Cole, who actually passed away a couple of years ago. And he had a son who passed away of HIV, et cetera. They're buried Nat's buried in Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, down the same hallway as Clara Bow and George Burns and Gracie Allen and Alan Ladd. And he's got one of those cool signature markers. It's his signature on the big wall in the mausoleum. That's his autograph. I've since looked at it, and it is his autograph. So I like when people do that, when they put their autographs on their graves. It's kind of neat. But that is cool. So he's at in the Freedom Mausoleum at Forest Lawn, Glendale.
So rest in peace, Nat King Cole, and we wanted to next talk about Burl Ives.
Interesting guy, I think.
Yes, I mean an Academy Award-winning actor and singer who just kind of did a little bit of everything. It seems like, and
was very successful at it too.
Yeah.
He, of course. I mean, he's been in those classic movies. He was in East of Eden with James Dean. Mm-hmm. He was in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof. He was in. He won the Oscar for a movie called The Big Country. I've never seen that, so I don't. He
won
that
supporting actor. I haven't seen it either. Yeah.
Yeah. But to baby boomers, it would be the narrator of the Rankin Bass show, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yes.
It was, it was classic growing up. It was just a literal classic. And
it's as classic. I mean, I think it's as classic as It's a Wonderful Life, or the Christmas Story or whatever.
Well, you'd wait a year to see that 25-minute little piece of film, right. That stop action animation, and which was really fascinatingly kind of, I don't want to say ripped off, but the Elf movie, I was watching one of those movies.
I think we talked about that on another episode. Yeah, I think we talked about this. Yeah, how the movies that made us on Netflix. I mean, they almost fascinating. They almost didn't get to finish the movie because they didn't clear it
without permission.
Right. I think they thought they had the okay and they didn't, and then it was. And Buddy's outfit was basically like a replica of, the same color and everything. They're trying to figure out if there was a way that they could like digitally change the color of his outfit to make it less. It's pretty wild.
I don't think they actually did get permission, but they made it different enough. But I don't know if Rankin Bass ever signed off on it.
I can't remember. I think they worked something out because I don't think the studio would have let them finish. And that was horrible because that was Jon Favreau's, I think, first directing film. And he, it would have, look at the career he's had since then, it would have just stalled him out so bad and look at what a huge hit that became. And Will Ferrell wasn't really seen as much of a movie star at that point either. And it launched him as a movie star. Like it launched these crazy careers that would have never happened if they had the production canceled halfway in because they didn't get the rights.
It's wild to see a movie that's come out in the last 15, 20 years. It's considered a Christmas classic, like that one is.
Yeah.
Like
and
Elf.
Elf is one where the minute I saw it, I was like, this is a classic. You knew right away. Yeah.
Yeah. So Burl Ives narrated Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer as the snowman. Mm-hmm. And that was made in 1964. that special. And now Troy was just telling me they redid it recently digitally, like frame by frame. I don't know where he saw that, but they actually redid it again. I don't know why.
Why would you do that?
But they redid it. I don't know. It had something to do with the process. I'll have to ask Troy about that later. In fact, we should probably, I don't know the point of it, but it was to add another scene that wasn't there or that they originally, I don't know. I just leave it. Just leave it. The Island of Misfit Toys was awesome.
Right.
I loved it. Loved it.
It is going to the elf thing. It is always a question of when does an homage become just ripping off?
Yeah.
And like Community did a whole episode that was in that style, that stop motion Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer style. They did a whole episode like that, but that was a comedy show, so it was parody.
Yeah.
I guess Elf, you couldn't say is parody. It was just straight up taking the look.
Someone seeing Elf for the first time that wasn't around in '64 would think that Elf came up with it, and they would watch the special and going, "Wow, that's really, that's really something." But what a coincidence!
So Burl Ives, his recordings of A Holly Jolly Christmas and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer came out of that special, and those recordings now have become on their own classic Christmas song recordings. And he passed away on April 14th, 1995, from oral cancer. I guess he smoked smoked pipes a lot throughout his life, and he was 85. He was 85.
There's a couple of things I wanted to point out about him. He towards the end of his life, he did a movie called The Man Who Wanted to Live Forever. And this is about a man who literally wanted to live forever, and he was harvesting organs from people who weren't dead yet. Like arranging for their deaths so he could have their organs so he could live together, which is a really fascinating idea. But he was the voice of something. There was an attraction at Disneyland called America Sings. And it was narrated by an eagle called Sam, and it was narrated by Burl Ives, and it was called the theater where it was in. You grew up here, so you remember like the Carousel of Progress, that round theater that was by Autopia.
Yep, I remember it. It was still there when I was growing up. Yeah.
So America Sings was this production within that theater, which literally turns around as the Carousel of Progress. And 2 weeks after it opened, there was a woman named Deborah Stone. She was a Disneyland employee. She was crushed to death. She was the first Disneyland employee to ever be killed on the job in that theater a week or 2 weeks after that show opened in Disneyland. Her name was Deborah Stone. She was crushed
by the carousel?
Yeah, she got stuck between a wall and the moving wall that was coming up to it. So she's standing here, and this thing is moving, and boom, she right when it's supposed to pass by. So there had been people killed at Disneyland before that, but never an employee. That was the first time an employee was killed in Disneyland, and they shut down the ride for 2 days, I think.
Well, I would hope.
And it wasn't, knowing Disney, it was not a tribute. I mean, they were just trying to scramble out on how to get that thing opened up again, But the way it was described, there was somebody that was in the audience, and he said he looked to the right and saw what he thought was a child being pulled between the platform and the wall, and heard a scream, which is fascinating. That was in the newspaper reporting that death. But yeah, there's a weird Burl Ives trivia question for you. So he was alive too when that happened. He lived for another 25 years after that. So Burl Ives, go figure.
Burl Ives. All right. So I wanted to throw a little curveball in here for our last one. And that is Alvin and the Chipmunks. And the Chipmunks song "Christmas Don't Be Late." So the Chipmunks, that song was recorded of this same era that we're talking about. It was actually recorded in 1958.
That early? I thought I was going to say mid-60s. Wow.
No, you would think, but no, it was recorded before there was any cartoon Chipmunks or anything like that. So it basically launched Alvin and the Chipmunks, which I didn't realize. I thought they were already established by the time the song got made. But Ross Bagdasarian, who was the guy that created the Chipmunks, and his stage name was Dave Seville, who is, their like dad or whatever on the show, David Seville. And so he was a singer, a songwriter, and an actor. He had previously done, he liked to do novelty songs. And so he had figured out, he'd done a novelty song, I think, earlier that year or the year before, called, I think, The Witch Doctor. About a guy who can't find love, and so he goes to see a witch doctor. And that was the first time that Ross figured out a way, his technique of speeding up the recording to make the voice sound higher pitched, which is, of course, how the Chipmunks, how they do those voices.
I didn't know that. A witch doctor, that was a big, remember that ooh ee ooh ah ah ting tang walla walla bing bang. That was a big song, yeah. So I didn't know that was Dave Seville as well.
It's wild. And so he figured out that recording technique. He did that song. It was a big hit. They wanted more. The record label wanted more of them. And supposedly he was driving through Sequoia National Forest and he almost hit a chipmunk with his car. And that gave him the idea of the Chipmunks. And he was like, I guess he thought, that sped up voice could sound like a chipmunk talking, so let's do something. So he released the song in 1958, and I mean, there was no chipmunk animated idea of this happening. That didn't come around for a few more years. I think 60 or 61 is when the Chipmunk animated series, like the first attempt at it, came out. But it sold 4 million copies in the first 2 months. It was number one on Billboard. It knocked off the Phil Spector song "To Know Him Is to Love Him" by the Teddy Bears.
Wow.
And it wasn't a couple years. I think it was 61 that they started doing the thing. But here's what's interesting. So Bagdasarian was Armenian American. His earliest one of his early songwriting credits was "Come On to My House," which Rosemary Clooney made famous. He wrote that
from White Christmas. Interesting.
Yeah. He also he'd been an actor and had bit parts. He had a small part in Stalag 17, for example. And this is my favorite one. My favorite film of all time is Rear Window by Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. Bagdasarian is the piano player neighbor.
Oh, how interesting.
Who's struggling to write his next hit song, and he writes the song Lisa. And there's a bunch of scenes with him. There's one where he comes home drunk and collapses, and he has a party next door, and eventually he ends up with Miss Lonely Hearts at the end.
Wow.
But yeah, that is basically Dave Seville.
Wow, that's so cool. I had no idea. Idea. Does he get screen credit for that?
I mean, he had lines. I would think he did. And that's how Hitchcock would always put himself into his movies. That's where Hitchcock put himself in the Rear Window. Hitchcock is in his apartment with Ross Bagdasarian, and Hitchcock is winding a clock on the mantle.
I've got to see that again. I was just looking at like a Hitchcock collection to watch over. I haven't seen that movie in probably 20 years. I have to check that out.
And I think I have it. I think they just came out with the 4K disc version too.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great. So unfortunately, Bagdasarian died from a heart attack in 1972. He was only 52 years old.
Wow, so he didn't, I mean, we're still talking about it, 50 years later, 50 years later now.
What happened was his son, Ross Bagdasarian Jr., I think is his name, his son took over the franchise, basically. Mm-hmm. His son got a law degree and kind of took over the family business and ended up buying the rights off from his siblings in the 90s. So all the Chipmunk stuff that happened in the 80s, 90s up till today, the more recent movies they've done, that's all been the son has kept that business going, basically.
Yeah, that was a big TV show. I remember watching that cartoon when I was a kid.
Me too.
That was so popular. Yeah.
Yep, it's great. Alvin. And then this is like a funny little piece of film trivia. I love it in Rocky IV when they get to the cabin in Russia to do his like final training before the big fight with the Russian. Polly is listening to that song, the Chipmunk song. On his headphones while they're hanging out and chilling in this like living room area of this cabin. Yeah, I always thought that was funny that Polly's listening to that song. So yeah, there you go, the Chipmunks and Dave Seville.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about Seville. That's do you know where he's buried? I wonder where he's buried. Do you know?
Wait, I do. I looked that up. Hold on. According to Find a Grave, he is buried at Chapel of the Pines Crematory in Los Angeles.
So he was, Chapel of the Pines is mostly storage. it's right on Wilshire by Angelus Rosedale, and they do tons of cremations, and they have storage rooms beneath just stacked from floor to ceiling with people's cremains, but they have a really small cemetery itself. For actually, display, quote unquote. But there's a ton of people underneath that. We actually got in there once and the door was open and we took some pictures down there and I wish I would have had more nerve because I would have gone up and down with the names and show, trying to figure out who was down there because that's sort of the final disposition on their death certificate, say Chapel of the Pines. But like Steven Stucker, the guy from Airplane who played Johnny, his was Chapel of the Pines. But to get somebody out of there and buried somewhere else, you have to go through this whole legal process.
And isn't that where the Frankenstein actor was? We talked about that.
Oh yeah, we sure did. Yeah,
was that the same place? Because it was a similar situation. He laid unclaimed for like 20 years or something.
Yeah. So that, Chapel, Inglewood has one of those too, though. Inglewood has, but when you first drive into Inglewood in the main entrance on the left, there's the chapel. And then, but underneath that chapel is another slew of storage rooms of people that aren't even buried, just there because I know they're paying the storage fee, but they're not out in the world like seeing on display. It's kind of interesting. But fascinating. So Dave Seville is there, but we don't know if he's on display. He might be just being stored there.
In storage, yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
It would be weird, though, that if his family is still around and they still have, obviously, still making quite a bit of money off of the franchise, why wouldn't they have taken care of his remains? You would think. I don't think there was any bad blood or anything like that. So
no,
weird,
some people just don't give a care. Some people just don't care.
That's true. Yeah.
It's not high on their, and also some people just have them. Like Larry Tate, the guy that played David White. He died, and it wasn't until like 25 years later he ended up at Hollywood Cemetery in a niche that's visible with that's decorated with all of his artifacts. So sometimes people keep them at home until they die, and then they want to be with them. Doing that app that I do, that Death a Day app, every day I'm finding somebody, and it's always like cremated to residence. What happened? I want to know where they are, and it just says it says cremated to residence, or
right. It's sitting on someone's mantle somewhere.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? All right. Do you want to get into worst Christmas songs?
Oh, I'm dying.
You've been waiting. You've been fired up. Ready to go.
I'll go into some good ones first, though. I'll go into some of my favorite ones.
I just wanted to say up front that I think the problem that I have with most Christmas songs, especially ones recorded post like 1970, is they're done so cynically. It always feels like a cash grab. A lot of these pop groups that put out albums, it's kind of like it's almost like the record label made them do it, kind of a deal, because it makes money. It's kind of like what Bill Nighy's character makes fun of in Love Actually. He's playing like a rock star that's put out this same thing. He's reworked one of his classic hits to be a Christmas song, and he's telling people it sucks. It's terrible, but they did it because it's because they'll make money. So. That's how I feel about a lot of these songs, and probably how I'm going to feel about a lot of the ones you're going to talk about.
Well, they did do that album in the 80s called A Very Special Christmas, where those people covered, the Eurythmics, Bruce Springsteen, the Pointer Sisters. I think it was done for a cause.
Is that where Springsteen came up with the Santa Claus is Coming to Town? Was that his thing?
Which is up there and one of the ones I hate the most because it sounds like he's taking a dump the whole time.
Sounds like he's straining.
But Annie Lennox or the Eurythmics did Winter Wonderland, which is one of my favorite songs, Christmas songs. I think he did Merry Christmas Baby. That's what it is. Bruce Springsteen did. Whitney Houston did Do You Hear What I Hear, which I think is a really good version of it. I like that a lot. So there were some good songs in it. There were some pretty clinkers. There was a lot of clinkers in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. We got to create a Christmas one in there. And then they become accidental, I think, super hits. Like Troy, when he hears that Mariah Carey song, he wants to murder. I mean, he wants to murder.
Yes, that is near at the top of my list. And speaking of Love Actually, that's in Love Actually.
Oh, is it really?
They perform it as the kids perform it as part of the school show at the end. Yeah, it's like kind of the finale, basically, is that song.
I don't mind it. I think it's a cute song, but it sets people off.
It's been so overplayed, I think, is the problem.
Yeah. Or isn't it a couple of years ago she was on the Macy's parade?
And that's the I don't want a lot for Christmas song. All I want is you. That song. Yeah.
All I want for Christmas is you.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
And they had her singing on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade a couple of years ago on a float, on a loop, and she was lip syncing. She just gave up. During it, she just like stopped. It's on YouTube. It's kind of funny, but she just
awesome.
Like screw this.
She's such a little diva. I love it.
Yeah,
she's
really
hilarious.
Is. She really is. She was on a show once, and I knew somebody that worked on the show, and she was a guest on this talk show, and she would just sit there in her chair, and she would go like this. And the assistant would come running up with a tray with like 3 different drinks on it.
Yes.
And she wouldn't even lift her eyes. She would just, like drink out of one of these drinks that she wanted. She would just tilt her head, and the assistant would come running with the drink. It's kind of, I love that story. But yeah, so that's one of those ones that people really like or don't like big time. Yeah. I love the Ronettes. When the Phil Spector Christmas album, I think is a fantastic album. And they did a Winter Wonderland, I think, and Sleigh Ride. I think Sleigh Ride is my number 1 Christmas favorite song. There's never a version I don't like of that with, right. Let's hear those sleigh bells ring-a-ling, jing-jing. I love that song. I'm a sucker for like instrumentals and big orchestrations. So I do love the Sleigh Ride song. And I think the Ronettes do a really fun version of that. I think it's up there too.
And speaking of Phil Spector, one of my favorite songs kind of that era and that genre is the Darling Love Christmas Baby Please Come Home recording. Spector did. If you ever, one of my favorite documentaries ever is 20 Feet from Stardom, and they do an excellent job of covering that whole story and how Letterman, started bringing her on the show every year as a tradition. I think that's so cool. Okay, so stuff you don't like. Let's hear it. Unload, Scott.
I like Santa Baby, kind of, by Eartha Kitt. I think that's a fun song, fun novelty song, really. And I don't like Madonna's version of it. I think that she did a substandard version of Santa Baby, personally. I really, really do not like Blue Christmas. Blue Christmas is one by Elvis. Never really liked it. I found a few other people that feel that way too. It's just not one that I enjoy.
Because Dean Martin did a cover of it also, but it was very similar style though. I mean, it's basically just Dino singing, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I talked to, he just said Rudolph the Red-Nosed, he goes, Rudy the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I talked to Angie Dickinson the other day, as it were. And, she was doing a one-woman night with Angie, and there was a little meet and greet afterwards. And I got an opportunity to talk to her for a minute about Dean Martin. And something that always bugged me about Dean Martin, is that the drunk thing is really good. It's really difficult to act drunk, usually, because when you're drunk, the whole thing is you're trying to act sober. So it's really difficult to act drunk. And I never believed for a second, because he also died of like liver and kidney failure. I mean, he also died on Christmas Day, so it's relevant. Yeah. And, but I asked her, I said, the Dean Martin thing, because she was friends with him. I said, how can you act that drunk? It had to be real. She goes, no, it wasn't. And I'll tell you that when I first met him the first time, he said, I had a stomach ulcer. The whole thing is an act. This is not verbatim, but she said that he told her straight off that he acts drunk and the whole thing is an act. I'm not on board, because ulcers are temporary. And I think that during those Dean Martin celebrity roasts, you couldn't even move.
And speaking of those, probably the most famous drunk act was Foster Brooks, who would do his great drunk act, but you could see him turn it on and off.
Yes.
He kind of, when he was done doing
Martin,
it, you could see him turn it off. It was kind of like an end scene moment, and he would be, and then he would walk. He was kind of to say that was an act. My performance has ended. You know what I mean? I don't think Dean did.
No. And if you watch, a case in point is the Jerry Lewis telethon, where they had the big reunion between Martin and Lewis, and Sinatra kind of maneuvered it and surprised. If you go back, I remember when it first happened, I was like, oh, it was a really sentimental, emotional thing. If you go back and watch it again, it's on YouTube. It's like Dean Martin can barely stand. He is slurring so poorly that Jerry Lewis just walks away and stands on the podium and watches, because Dean Martin is just cannot even. He has to be led away by Sinatra, literally standing, couldn't even stand. I think he had a cigarette in his hand and he burned his coat with it. This is all like. You know, I'm not saying it's not as all lovely and wonderful as everyone remembers it to be, because some things are not supposed to be memorialized every second of. Now we can analyze them and can't leave it as just a nice memory. But it is very interesting. I don't believe, she told me point blank, her mouth to my ears, that it was an act, but I'm not sure it was. So anyway. Another song that I will flip the switch as soon as it comes on is Little Saint Nick by the Beach Boys. Cannot. I'm not a big fan of falsetto anyway, but the Beach Boys I can forgive a lot of, because I think they're brilliant. But Little Saint Nick was like, I don't like that song. Last Christmas, that was George Michael. Step Into Christmas, Elton John. Wonderful Christmas Time, Paul McCartney. Again,
that's at the top of my hate list.
Yeah?
That's the top of my hate list. Yeah, I hate it so much.
Which one?
Wonderful Christmas Time by Paul McCartney. Yeah. That's number one on my list. Yeah. To me, it's the epitome of the cynical, we're doing a Christmas song to make money type of songs. Yes. Do you know what I mean? And it's Paul McCartney, like his worst instincts, I think, as it's kind of a cynical songwriter. It's grating and annoying. Yeah.
It's interesting because they have in Britain, like a tradition, whatever's the Christmas #1 single. That's like every year. That's what people look forward to. The Christmas #1. Right. So these are like,
and that's what I think Bill Nighy is trying to go for. His character is trying to go for on Love Actually, is make it #1. Yeah. Yeah.
So every Christmas, it's got to be a tradition that they have a Christmas #1 song. So I think people were just kicking them out. Yeah. I think it was contrived and they're pretty. Yeah, it's pretty chewy, bubblegummy kind of stuff. Throwaway stuff that didn't expect to last 40 years.
Yeah, it's not the great compositions from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So not a fan. The second worst song for me is the Charlie Brown Christmas. I want to scream when that comes on. I hate that Christmas time. I hate that song so much.
That is a polarizing song. I've come to like it more. It is kind of a sad, almost kind of warped sounding song.
And when it starts, it's like, this is going to last 20 minutes. I know, you know what I mean? It's so slow and no, I don't know. It's awful. No, I don't think that should be a Christmas classic. I don't think so, personally.
So that was, Vince Guaraldi was the great jazz musician who did all the Peanuts music. And he was, speaking of people who died young unexpectedly, he had a massive heart attack when he was 47 in 1976 and almost died on the stage. He had just played a set at a nightclub in California, and he went back to his hotel room and basically collapsed, started feeling sick to his stomach, and went to the restroom and collapsed in the bathroom and died from a massive heart attack. And I think he was another one that just had kind of had an unhealthy lifestyle with, the smoking and eating and everything else, and didn't kind of take it seriously enough from his doctors about what was, how serious his situation was. But yeah.
Now, Band-Aid, do they know it's Christmas? That's kind of an interesting one. I'm not on board either way with it big time, but I remember when it came out and it was a big deal because it was Live Aid came from that basically, that concept where they.
It was it was like the We Are the World of Christmas songs.
Feed the people, stay alive. No.
That one's near the top of my list also because it's just that pretentious rock star.
Yes.
Nonsense.
Oh, and let's have Sting have the line where Bitter Sting comes out. That'd be great, But it's not as bad as Feed the World, the one they did at A&M. That is, to me, so contrived. I mean, that's the point. It is contrived, but it's so it's just agony. It's just like, all those people together could donate half their fortunes. Why should I have to pay $5? It's solve world hunger yourselves. You got the money.
I love all the footage though. Have you seen the footage from the We Are the World recording sessions where they show like Michael Jackson is especially hilarious on that because his facial expressions reacting to how some of the people are singing. He's just like, no.
That was the height of Michael Jackson dumb too.
Right.
I mean, it was like right at the Thriller album time.
Yep.
And I think they shot it right after the Grammys, so everyone was already exhausted anyway. And they ended up starting the session at like midnight or something.
Yeah.
And see Bob Dylan in there, singing "Feed the World."
You can, and he's and Quincy Jones trying to, probably the only person who could have brought all those huge egos together and made that work, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a legendary gathering of people, that's for sure. The fact that all those people were in one room together is pretty amazing,
for sure,
pretty spectacular. So the last song on my list, the number one song I despise the most, the one that makes me dive for the volume button or the off button on the radio, is called "The Christmas Shoes." Do you know it?
I've heard of it. I can't think of how it goes right now, though.
It is the most agonizing. It's just so awful. It's about a little boy that goes to a department store to buy a pair of shoes, and it's just Mike, I can't even tell you how bad this song is because I don't want to spoil it for people because it'll be a spoiler. Because if anyone hasn't heard it before, they're going to listen to the song and they're going to see exactly what I mean.
It's been out long enough that nobody can.
Well, he basically is buying this pair of shoes for his dead mother, and you go through the whole song not knowing that this mother's dead, and it is so hard to sit through. It is slow. It is awful. It's contrived. It just makes me insane. And people like really, my sister first played it for me and she goes, "Oh, you're going to love this song. It's so beautiful." It's like, no, it is so.
I would love to see the expression on your face the first time you heard it with your sister excitedly waiting for you to hear it.
It was something that I gave it a moment and I just thought, this is contrived piece. It's done by a group called New Shoes. I didn't even know who sang it because I never even cared enough. But,
wait, they basically named their group for the song.
No, I'm sorry. It's a Christian vocal group called New Song. And it was released in 2000, and it is about this little boy who well, get this. The song has appeared on various worst Christmas song lists. And the song was named the worst Christmas song ever by Jezebel.com. And it is so awful. A little boy wants to buy a pair of shoes for his terminally ill mother. And the boy tells the cashier he wants her to appear beautiful when she meets Jesus. It is so... I can't even tell you. You got it.
He wants her to appear beautiful like in the casket?
When she meets Jesus. Since he is short on money, he the narrator ends up paying for the shoes, which reminds him of the true meaning of Christmas. It is just hateful.
Which is the true meaning of Christmas is buying things at a department store.
Buying shoes for a little boy who wants his mother to look beautiful when she meets Jesus because she's terminally ill.
When she gets to the pearly gates, yeah.
Right. So she's going to have those sassy ass shoes. Jesus.
Nice shoes.
Click, 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 click. Oh, man. That's where up on the rooftop, click, click, click.
How embarrassed would you be if they didn't mention them? when you got there. Like, you didn't even notice my shoes.
I challenge anyone to that whole song. And there's probably people just kind of going, oh, how dare you say that? It's the most beautiful song ever. And there's always people that do say that.
Yeah,
and
sure.
obviously people that disagree with things. But absolute agony. I can't even believe it. Somebody okayed that to record it. And I can't believe it. People are even talking about it like me. But it is so awful that that is my number one I despise song ever. Is in life. I think in life, not just a Christmas song. I think it's like one of the worst songs ever in my life.
That's funny because, White Christmas is the biggest selling song in history. Mm-hmm. Not even just Christmas songs, just of any song. And according to you, the Christmas Shoes is the worst song in history. So we've run the full spectrum.
Contrived, sappy, pulling at the heartstrings. My mother is going to die, and she needs shoes, and I can't afford to pay for them. I mean, it's like
it's the Hallmark Christmas movie of Christmas songs.
And that is the last thing that, buy morphine, with your money. Don't
go over the will one more time.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
Some planning.
I'm just saying. But that's it for my bad Christmas songs.
Well, they couldn't do a song called The Christmas Morphine. That would be weird. So they made it about
But shoes. A lot of people would really enjoy that, I think.
Christmas morphine.
the Christmas Klonopin.
Well, I'm sure there are people who agree and disagree with our list, but I will say that one of the ways that we are manipulated by TV channels and media outlets is with the lists. Whenever they put out a top 10 list, whether it's what they call list shows on TV, top 10 vacation destinations, top 10 beaches, whatever, or any article comes out with a top 10 or whatever, they put that out knowing people will disagree and debate it and then talk about it, and it will get traffic.
Well, I'm not doing it for traffic. I'm just doing it to get it out there that I hate it so much.
You have pure intentions.
No, I would sit in a room by myself and just say it to myself. I hate that song. Oh my God.
Right. All right.
Oh, before we go, I just want to say, by your recommendation, I finally watched for the first time The Bishop's Wife.
Yes, with Cary Grant and David Niven. Yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was another one that was quite sappy, and but that was the time. It was very Capra-esque.
Yes.
I was surprised that it was known right off the bat that Cary Grant was an angel, so it's not a spoiler at all.
Right.
And it was a nice Christmas movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, that was my mom's favorite, so I always watch it every year in her honor. And apparently it was somewhat controversial because Cary Grant playing an angel was kind of against type. He tended to play kind of darker or gray area characters, and I think that was somewhat controversial to have him play an angel in that era. This is what I think it was 1949 or something like that. But they shot that movie on the lot over by Formosa Cafe.
Really? Okay.
That's where they filmed it. Yeah. You should look up the trailer for it. Is really wild because trailers back then were so weird. They're not like they are now. It was so about star power that it was literally the trailer for it is they're on the back lot, or they're on the lot together, like outside the sound stages, and it's Cary Grant and Loretta Young and David Niven, and they've realized they forgot to shoot the trailer. So the trailer is them remembering, we forgot to shoot the trailer. So then they run over to get on one of the sound stages, and there's a security guard there that stops them, as if that would ever happen. And they have to explain to the security guard what the movie is about, and that's basically the trailer. And then at the end, they just show a quick clip reel with music of some of the big moments from the film with titles over it, and that's the whole trailer. It's really wild. It's very, very strange. But I wanted to mention that one also because it ties into our Universal Monsters. Because the maid, the housekeeper in their home, is Elsa Lanchester, Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes. Who played a servant, as usual.
Right. She got typecasted,
Yeah. But there's also another one, too. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but Carolyn Grimes played Zuzu in It's a Wonderful Life, and she plays the daughter in this movie, too.
Oh, really? I didn't make
so.
that connection.
Dude, let's look that up because I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, let me look.
Bishop's wife. That's her. Yeah.
Wow, that is really wild.
So yeah, it's another that is the one of our podcasts is It's a Wonderful Life that we did, and so there's an association with that and the Universal Monsters with Elsa Lanchester. Yep. So it's interesting that that little girl played those two iconic Christmas movies.
Right. Yeah, if you go to the IMDb page for The Bishop's Wife, the trailer is at the top. So anybody watching this can watch this wild trailer with Cary Grant and David Niven and Loretta Young. I thought another interesting bit about this was there were 2 screenwriters credited on it, and I think it was based on a novel. But this one screenwriter's name was Leonardo Bercovici, and he ended up getting blacklisted in the 50s, just a few years later. He was blacklisted by the House Un-American Activities Committee because he was called in to testify. He'd been named by Edward Dmytryk and another person. And so in 1951, he had to go and testify, and he swore he was not a member of the Communist Party, but then invoked his Fifth Amendment rights when they asked if he had ever been in the past. And he got blacklisted as a result. He had to move to Europe for years and try to make a living there. I think he was there for like 6 or 7 years before he finally came back to work with on a Tyrone Power film that ended up not getting made because Power died. But yeah, and it's interesting when you watch the movie it's every time there's like layers. It's a little bit more complex than you realize at first, because I've seen it probably 30 times now, and I watched it again a couple weeks ago, and I still catch little things that I've never caught before, like little lines of dialogue that tie into. There's some interesting layers there, but when he does the line about he's looking at the painting of the cathedral, and Cary Grant says, that big roof could make so many little roofs. Mm-hmm. That is, and then you realize the guy that wrote that got blacklisted for, being a communist. There's an interest. It's just interesting, the whole.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's very, because the I don't want to give away the movie to anybody who hasn't seen it yet, but the setup is that Niven plays a bishop, and he's trying to build this huge cathedral, and he's trying to woo this rich widow who's going to give him the money to make the cathedral, but she wants to make it all about her dead husband. And she wants it basically to be in a monument. So David Niven asks for help. He prays for help, and Cary Grant comes down as an angel to help him, but of course not in the way that he expects. And that's what the movie's all about. So, yeah. Yeah.
It's cute. I enjoyed the movie. I did, very much so.
Well, good. Did we do it? Did we do Christmas?
I'm going to go watch Pee-wee's Christmas special now.
A palate cleanser.
Another one of our podcasts.
Yes, exactly. I love it.
We do like our Christmas, don't we?
So thanks again. We always have to do a shout out to our Patreon supporters. We keep adding new ones, and we're going to do another exclusive show for them probably next week. So look out for that. But we wanted to get this out in time for Christmas. So again, thanks to all our Patreon supporters, and thanks to everyone else. Thanks to all of you for listening to our show every week or every month.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful Christmas or whatever you happy holidays, Happy New Year, everything else like that. Put on those Christmas shoes.
And on that, we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for watching, you guys. Thanks.
This has been an episode of the Dearly Departed podcast. Dig up more episodes at dearlydepartedpod.com and on iTunes and Google Play. See you next time.